The Great War between the Cassians and the Solonians is one of the most important wars in the history of Solon. It began the Second Solonian Age and saw the fall of the once mighty Cassian Empire. The greatest account of the war was passed down by Titan Olywas, who was a participant of the war on the Solonian side and a friend of the fabled Icarus Corvus. The war was long delayed by the existence of the Farland state. However, the Solonians in their expansion would destroy the Farlands and take control of their territory. With their land touching Cassian land, war became inevitable. The war began in the 574th year of the First Solonian Age by a minor port of the Solonians. The Cassians, led by the Blue Baron Pauline, destroyed ships held by the surprised Solonians and slaughtered every Solonian on the ships except for one. The survivor was meant to tell the Solonians what had happened, and the Cassians expected the Solonians to become afraid of the Cassians. The Solonians, however, were not afraid. They were angry. The next battle would occur near the settlement of Kur. Battlement was pressed by the Cassians against the prepared Solonians, despite the fact that they were at a disadvantage. The Solonians had a dense forest and a river by their side and behind their back, meaning they were effectively trapped, which in turn meant that they would fight to the death. Led by a Solonian general named Vokrant against the Blue Baron, they fought. It was not a difficult battle. The cocky Cassians were slaughtered en masse by the desperate Solonians, and whatever captives were taken were executed. Vokrant was acclaimed by the Solonian Senate, then sent to the settlement of Aegin. Pauline died, and his nephew, Palin, would then gain the title and position of the Blue Baron. The next notable battle was one of treachery. The Yellow Baron, Piter, ambushed a Solonian camp in the night and killed the sleeping soldiers. For this battle, Piter earned the sobriquet of the Dreamstalker. The next major battle was just outside of Aegin. Vokrant learned of Piter's battle and was enraged. So he sent out a small cavalry force near the Yellow Baron's army to lure them to the well-defended Aegin. Piter, however, sent his nephew with a large portion of his army instead of coming himself. His nephew, the Yellow Lord Reve, chased Vokrant's force day and night through thick rain, tiring his soldiers who wore heavy armor. They then fought at daybreak, exhausted. To make things worse, in their heavy armor they sank into the mud, whereas the Solonians, familiar with the terrain, wore light armor. The Cassians were slaughtered, and Reve had his tongue cut out and his head cut off. The Yellow Baron would attempt to avenge his nephew in another ambush attack near a famed Solonian entrance to the forest of what is now Sinfane. His force was 3 times larger than the force of the Solonians. Over the course of 3 days, he tried to break the Solonian resolve, but failed. On the 3rd day, he ordered his entire force to attack at once. Every Solonian died, but one managed to kill the Dreamstalker. Officially, it was a Cassian victory, but it is typically known that the Solonians were the true winners. Desperate after the death of the Yellow Baron, the Blue Baron Poland tried to siege Cooley, the Solonian capital. He decided to sail to the Solonian capital, but a Solonian navy general named Septimius heard of this. So he amassed an incredible force and waited just outside of Cooley. The Blue Baron arrived and was unprepared for the Solonian numbers, so he was killed alongside his entire force. At this point, Cassian morale was at its lowest, so the Cassian Senate finally decided to use someone they had long since avoided using. They asked for their greatest general to join the war, the popular quote-unquote Black Baron, Turmaine. Turmaine made his name in the mysterious West, where his soldiers proclaimed him the Black Baron, a title which had not existed for centuries. So great were his achievements that the Western Sea is still remembered as the Black Baron Sea, despite his fighting on the losing side of this war. Immediately, Turmaine besieged the important Solonian city of Nîmes, which had served as a war front capital of sorts for the Solonians. He built a wall around the city, locking many potential resources for the Solonians. Eventually, the Solonians had to give in. Turmaine sacked the city and Cassian morale rose once more. Next, Turmaine ordered the Blue Baron, name unknown, to pelt the coastal city of Yechem with arrows from the sea. Then on land, Turmaine approached the weak walls of Yechem in the night. When the city awoke and heard of Turmaine's force, they surrendered. Part of the terms of surrender was the death of every Solonian soldier in the city, and so they all died. After Yechem, the Solonians reinforced all their great cities near what is now Sinfane, expecting that Turmaine would strike there. Turmaine, however, had bigger ambitions. Going all the way down to the Jade Isles, a territory with no one government, who in reality had long been a client state of the Cassians, and he decided to invade what is now Karayev by land. Poland, Turmaine figured, would never have won on the sea, as the Solonians would always be able to amass a force quicker overseas than over land. If the Cassians surprised the Solonians on land, then the Solonians would not have enough time to defend their cities. So, Turmaine went through the Cassian mountains, the Jade Isles, and the Jade Jungles. Many died, and indeed, Turmaine picked up a disease while journeying through the jungle, but they got through, besieged cruelly, and broke through. The Solonian aristocracy was all but wiped out, and the Solonians would be forced to change capitals. Turmaine, however, would not live to enjoy his victory. His disease, leprosy, killed him then, and the Cassians lost their greatest military mind. After Turmaine broke the Solonian Yasudo, a man named Icarus Corvus would repair it. Being of noble descent and a career military man, Icarus made himself emperor. He was the one to change the capital, and he would be the man to take control of the Solonian military. After Akuli was sacked, Icarus decided to sack the Cassian capital. So he would. The Solonians arrived outside of Cassia, built a wall around the city just like Turmaine did in Nime, and starved out the Cassians in the land. The Cassian military was mired up in Seinfeld and wouldn't know of the fall of their capital until the war was over and it was too late. Titan Oliwas was presented at this event and described Cassia as being ravaged. After Cassia fell, the Solonians took control of all Cassian territory, including the Jade Isles. They would then, for nearly 800 years, be the greatest force in Solon, but that's a story for another time. To end the story of this war, I will now quote Titan Oliwas's thoughts of the post-war world. Quote, "After these events, Icarus Corvus was hailed as the savior of Solon. Indeed he was. In defeating the Cassians, he ensured our survival, as well as doubling our territory. This was seen as evident enough proof that the gods favored him above all alive, and he was acclaimed by many as being the truest Solonian to ever exist. We remade our years to match his ascension, and the beginning of the proclaimed Second Solonian Era was afoot. Personally, after the war, I spent years wandering Solon, hoping to find a life for myself. Eventually, I made my way to Ispuki, and I was fortunate enough to obtain a job in the Central Palace just after it had been built. I have since been given important accolades, and I've become a friend of His Holiness Corvus. Indeed, it was him who commissioned this book for me to write, and it is to him who I give all my thanks. Corvus, you are the one who got us through the horrid events described here, and I wish for you to know that I will forever be grateful for what you have done." Unquote.